Good morning. Welcome you all here. I feel so pleased to be with you this morning. This is the fifth part of a six-part series called The Art of Living Together. And we're focusing on relationships because relationships are everything. I've told you that week after week after week now. And there's no experience that you have in your life that doesn't involve a relationship. Whether it's a relationship you have with your higher power, a relationship that you have with yourself, with other people, with the situations and circumstances in your life, or with other things in the world. Relationships are everything. We don't have a solitary individual experience. It's always relating to something. Now, over the past 5 weeks, Sandra and I have been talking about relationships more or less in general. Relationships with the world as a whole, the relationships with our situations and circumstances that we engage in with other people. But today we're going to zero in and talk about those relationships that we deem to be very special, like the relationship of a spouse or a very good friend or somebody that you're deeply connected to. Those relationships that we want in our life that fulfill us, that really give us the greatest gift that life has to offer. I'd like to start off by talking about a theory called the point of harmony. Excuse me, not a theory, it's more like a practice. Point of harmony. And the point of harmony, quite frankly, states that with every single person in your life, you can find a point of harmony. No matter how belligerent they are, how irascible they are, how disrespectful they are, you can find a point of harmony with that person. Now it goes like this. The more exposure we have to somebody, the more they influence us in one way or another. That influence has an effect on us, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. So the point of harmony is determining the amount of exposure that we have with other people. If you'll imagine for just a moment a target, a circular target. In the middle there's a tight little spot called the bullseye. And from that there are rings that go out until you get to the outer rim. Well, those rings, or those circles, represent the amount of exposure that you have with another person. So in the bullseye, that is constant exposure. It might be a family member, a good friend or something that you're with a lot. You have a lot of exposure, they have a lot of influence on you, and they affect you in a certain way. Then there's other people that sometimes there's a little bit of a rub in the relationship. And you can't have the exposure that you do with those that are in the center point, so to speak. With those, you have to set them out a little bit so that the exposure lessens. Their influence over you is less than the other people. And then you continue to go out until you get to the outer rim. Now, I like to use my Uncle Harry as an example on this. My Uncle Harry and I have never got along. We think totally different. Our viewpoints are conflicting. And whenever we're together in any sort of a setting, it usually ends up in some sort of an argument or some sort of hurt feelings. Something happens. So with Uncle Harry, I have to set my exposure limit and put him way out in the outer rim. And that means a Christmas card and a birthday card once a year. That's the exposure limit that I can take with Uncle Harry. But I have discovered when he is out there and the exposure is limited, I can actually love the man. God bless his soul. Because he's not close enough to push my buttons. Now the goal is to bring Uncle Harry in closer and closer to the center point. And I've been working on that for 37 years. But Uncle Harry hasn't moved. So I'm just going to bless him from afar. Now, the importance of this is the people that we hang around with the most, the people that we have the most exposure to, have an effect on us. And that effect affects our disposition and our outlook on life. University of Harvard did a study of 5,000 people over 20 years. And they discovered that when a person has a lot of exposure to or hangs around with somebody that is upbeat and positive, their happiness increases by 15%. Phil here is a happy guy. He's upbeat. He's positive. If Phil and I spend a lot of time together, my happiness is going to go up. It transfers from him to me. Now, I find that to be amazing, the effect that we have on other people. But I leave Phil, and I go over here, and I'm hanging out with Gene. My happiness has increased 15%, and just by hanging out with Gene, even though he's never met Phil, his happiness is going to increase as well from me. And then he goes off and meets his next-door neighbor who I've never met, and that person's happiness increases, and it goes back 3 degrees of separation, so to speak. The bottom line is happiness is contagious, and that's why it's important that we outline the people in our lives and put them at the levels that is going to create a positive effect on us, with the hope that we can move them closer and closer into the circle. Now today, for those close, intimate relationships, the ones that you really want in your life, no matter how good they are, there's always stumbles along the way. The path has some potholes in it, no matter how close the relationship. None of us here can ever expect another person to never disagree with us. There's going to be disagreements, there's going to be problems, there's going to be arguments, there's going to be all sorts of disappointments along the way, but there is a way that we can manage those in those close, intimate relationships so that the harmony maintains itself and it doesn't get into a point where the health of the relationship is diminished. Now the first characteristic of a good relationship is trust. Trust has to be the foundation of a relationship, or there really isn't anything. The second most important thing is teamwork. You have to be together with each other, no matter what the subject matter is, no matter how opposing your viewpoints are, you have to be together as a team. Now imagine for a moment 2 people walking down the path of life. One person is walking north, one person is walking south. They come to a huge boulder in the middle of the road. The ditches on each side are steep and deep and too dangerous to walk around. So here they are, each on either side of the boulder, and they're both trying to push the boulder to get it out of the way so they can get to where they want to go. And they're pushing against each other, making no progress at all. And that's how it is in close, intimate relationships. We love each other, we get along most of the time, but occasionally a boulder of a problem comes between us, and it separates us. We're on opposing sides, pushing against each other, trying to make progress, and progress isn't made. You know, sometimes the arguments escalate to anger, or to shouting, or to name-calling, or to accusing, or finger-pointing, or blame, whatever it might be. And that's because we're separated by the problem. So just as the 2 people on the road finally come to the idea that they can do this if they work together, one yells around the boulder, "Hey, let's push this to the side and roll it down the ditch so we can go on our way." They do that, and the problem is solved. So what I'm saying is, when a problem arises in a relationship that you have, it's important that you and the other person step outside of the problem, and together as a team, you look at the problem, you think about the problem, you come up with solutions for the problem, you come up with other options and possibilities, but you are a team together working on something that attempted to divide you. And when you do that, you will come up with a solution together. So the first thing is teamwork. You have to be together when you're solving your problems or overcoming your challenges. The greatest, I believe, the greatest cause of a relationship that's terminated or that ends up in a divorce or something is that there's a breakdown in communication, because people are focusing not only on the problem but on their solution to the problem or what they think should happen, and they're not allowing or communicating with the other person to truly understand how they feel. Now, the second thing I want to share with you in regards to keeping relationships in harmony is that once the teamwork is established, and you've committed to that, then you have to come up with agreements. Every team, no matter what it is, has rules that they play by. And so when we talk about spiritual agreements, we're talking about conscious contracts for the team to abide by. And it's entirely up to you to determine what rules you and your teammate want to go by. But I'm going to give you 4. I've discovered that these 4 can solve almost any problem in a very quick and harmonious way if both people commit to them. And a commitment in a spiritual contract is binding. It is not something that is here today and not here tomorrow. It is binding. And that means that the agreement is not broken unless the 2 people get together and one person verbally says, I want to rescind my agreement to this. And that happens sometimes. Now, personally, I feel that a relationship should never end. A divorce should never happen unless the relationship is abusive, or one of the other is uncaring or unkind, or there's just no love left in the relationship. Then you can take a look at how do we dissolve this relationship as it is and redefine it as another relationship. But other than that, we need to commit to the relationship. And that's the first agreement that I'm going to share with you. It's commitment. And that means never give up. It means continue to look for a way to repair the relationship to good health. Commitment is so important. You know, oftentimes when we get into arguments and things start going crazy and we're throwing brickbats back and forth at each other, it's so easy to just lose patience and say, that's it. I'm out of here. I'm done. Through. But that sometimes just comes out as a threat. And it damages the relationship more than any words that you could possibly speak, because it puts into the relationship the fear that the other person might leave, or the other person has given up, or the other person does not want to be with me. And that remains long after the argument is settled. So agreeing to commit to the relationship is the first point. The second point is communication. And they say that you cannot communicate too much when you're in the midst of a problem or a challenge with another person. Communication is key. Not just any communication, but communication that is based on truth. When you're moving into an argument or a challenge of some sort, the goal is to find the truth of the matter. And that can only come about by 2 people joining together, and this creates a certain sense of vulnerability. They join together and they share how they feel. Not what the other person has done. That doesn't make any difference, but how they feel about what is happening or what has happened. Communication in an honest, truthful sense. And it's not always easy to do because we're afraid of several things. First of all, we're afraid the other person's feelings might get hurt. If I really say what's on my mind or what I'm irritated about to my friend, it might hurt their feelings. They might get mad at me. Or we worry about how we will look if we really confess our most inner feelings, or what other people will think if it gets out that we shared this with somebody. But the truth of the matter is the only place that 2 people can stand to be together. So we have commitment, we have communication. The third thing is compassion, essential for the health of any relationship. And when it comes to compassion, it's really quite easy. If we're in the midst of an argument or we have a difference between us, it's simply me leaving my position and taking your position and thinking, how is this person feeling at this time? How would I feel if I were them? It's being open enough to embrace their position and look at it and observe it and just get a feeling for where they're at and what they're thinking about. And then they do the same with me. Compassion is allowing yourself to go deep into the spirit or the soul of the other person and find a sense of neutrality and find a sense of deeper understanding in regards to how they feel. So we have commitment, we have communication, we have compassion, and the fourth thing, is forgiveness. Now, I don't know about you, but oftentimes in the past, when I've gotten in an argument with my wife, something will happen as the argument escalates, and one person will get offensive, say something that is hurtful, or say something that is mean, or cast blame, or point fingers or something. And when that happens, the other person immediately goes on the defense to cast off the blame and begins to defend themselves. Well, when the defense wears thin and there's nothing else to defend, what do? They jump onto the offensive and they start firing back at the other person. And they start name-calling, they start shouting, they start doing all sorts of other things. Is this familiar to anybody other than me? So what usually happens in these arguments is we leave the point of the argument and we go to our artillery closet where we have all the bad things the other person has done for years and years and years. We open it up. And he said, well, 6 months ago, you were late for dinner. Yeah, well, if you learned how to cook, I wouldn't be late for dinner. And all sorts of insults are being launched back and forth. Well, I remember 1981 when you went out with Mary Ann and you didn't tell me. And it just goes on and on and on. The point never gets resolved. As a team, our objective is to find resolution because problems and challenges that don't get resolved are the greatest cause of stress in any relationship. And they usually resurface again at some point in the future. There is a practice that you can do with a spouse, with a good friend, with a family member, and it's suggested you do it once a month. And once a month, the two of you sit down, and I like to bring the unity candle into it. Two people sit down, there's two candles that are lit, and there's one that is not lit. The two candles that are lit represent are symbolic of each person's individuality, their spirit, their soul. The single candle that's not lit is called the unity candle, and that's symbolic of the relationship, combined equally by both the people. So the two candles light the single candle, and this brings a sense of union, once again, a unity, a oneness together for the team. Now, once that's been done, one person forgives the other person for every single thing that person has done up to that point in time that has been hurtful, that has been painful, that has left some sort of a smear on the relationship. They forgive it and they pray to God or promise God that they will never bring up those things again. Never. They're done. The artillery closet is empty. And then once both people have done that, forgiven the other person for everything from the past, then each one of them forgives themselves. I not only forgive you, but I forgive myself for the part that I played in those relationships, and I'm never going to beat myself up, criticize myself, feel guilty, feel shameful about those things that I've done in the past. They're gone. And it's a clean slate where the relationship is in its prime health. Now, I grant you, going forward, it's not always easy to maintain that commitment to forgive everything, and you might slip, and you might revert back to something that was done earlier in the day or a week ago or something like that. And that's okay as long as you're aware of the fact, oh my gosh, I broke that commitment, I broke that forgiveness prayer, and you correct it immediately. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Please excuse me. So, any relationship, you have the teamwork, which is essential. The team plays by rules. The rules are commitment, you never give up. Communication, you cannot communicate too much. Compassion, put yourself in the other person's place. Treat them like you'd want to be treated. And the fourth is forgiveness. Just let it go. When you don't forgive something in a relationship, it's like walking down the path of life and you get a pebble in your shoe and the pebble hurts your foot, but you continue to walk. You don't want to stop and take the time to take the pebble out. For some reason, the hurt and the pain reminds you of the justification you had for being in the argument to begin with. So what I'm suggesting with forgiveness is you take time to stop, take the pebble out of the shoe, put it on, and have a nice, comfortable walk as you proceed down the path. Once again, relationships are everything, and that's why we're putting such emphasis on them. Your entire life experience, the degree of love and happiness and peace and harmony that you have, entire life experience, all comes from relationships. And we're students of life. We're learning how to do this. We're learning how to get along with each other. That's why we're talking about this. We're learning how to move down the path so that we're surrounded by loving, peaceful, harmonious people, and those that we can't seem to align ourselves with are still within our circle, but they're out there with less exposure, and we can love them as well. So you think about that as we go on. Is there anybody in your life right now that you might consider forgiving for something that you've been holding a grudge against them, or some hurt that they imposed upon you, some sort of disrespect, some sort of mistrust, whatever it might be? Just allow yourself to go to that place where you can just release it and be free of it. We'll now move into meditation.